Will, to go to a moment, we mentioned it right off the beginning of the show. It was probably the only time in my life. Now, I worked on the 2004 convention that was in New York City after 9/11 that the Republican Party decided to have in New York, even though it was a pretty hostile place. I think it was still the largest protest in history, convention history, was outside Madison Square Garden during the Republican National Convention with George W. Bush. But it was also a time when the Republican Party came together very united after those 3 years. We were at war. We were dealing with terrorism inside our own country. And we decided as a party to go back, to go to New York, host the convention there. That was a very serious moment. But I will tell you, it still did not reach a moment where 6 days ago, the person on stage accepting the party's nomination was shot in the head and still has a very large bandage on his ear and a part of his ear that is no longer there. And so I wanted to play this bite right from the early part of the speech because it was different. Usually in a convention speech, you come out and it's very hard hitting from the top. You want the crowd going wild. But President Trump knew he had to do something. He had to address this event on Saturday. And he said this is the only time he will be addressing it. It's too painful for him. He thanked the Secret Service team that got around and protected him. He's obviously going to let the investigators and the people that are going to do that to get to the bottom of it, like we are at the ACLJ, take that on. Him personally, he's got to move on as a candidate for the country. Take a listen.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Not supposed to be here. Yeah. Thank you. But I'm not. And I'll tell you, I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
I mean, I think, Will, whatever you want to say about President Trump and his personal faith or who he is, we've seen him as president. We've seen him on the issues. We've seen who will nominate, who he fights for at the court. Of course, we fought for him before with Mueller, with the first impeachment. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been impeached when he wasn't even president, who's had to sit through criminal trials. And when you demonize people like President Trump talked about, and when he made that call to knock this off, to stop calling people enemies of democracy, to stop calling people Hitler, because if you killed Hitler, you would think you were doing something good. You were doing something that would be applauded. And this is likely encouraging people to take this kind of action. But I think, well, again, it was very somber and sobering moment for the country. And you kind of are looking at Donald Trump and saying, you kind of do that check like, would I even be here right now? Not if this similar kind of thing even happened to you. If you have the pain of a rifle injury on your ear and you are giving an address to accept the nomination for the biggest job in the world while you're still healing from that gunshot. And yet it's not you who's people are talking about dropping out of the race. It's your opponent thinking about dropping out of the race for not being able to stick with it. And then that, of course, raises a lot of issues about whether or not Joe Biden's entire cabinet has allowed him to go on as president. And how could he really stay in office as president, finish out the term, if he doesn't feel like he's competent to be on the ballot in 2 months?
That's right, Jordan. And in that tone that you heard from President Trump, it was very reflective. He, like you said, he went into great detail telling the story, and that's what took the large portion of that first act of his speech last night. But you even hear with that bite about I'm not supposed to be here tonight, and the tone of the bite we played in the previous segment about, that I want to be president. I'm running for president for all America, not half America. And that is that's not what he always believed, but the way the circumstances of what's happened have almost given him a new liberty to speak in that way with a different tone that is not what you'd expect from the fighter Donald Trump. But him having this life experience and this tragedy and this horrific attack and seeing supporters of his, which he loves his supporters. He is very much on their team. He loves the firefighters. He loves the police. He sees this happen. He sees this tragedy around him. It almost gives him the liberty to speak in this tone. And I don't think this is the last time we'll see him being in this more somber, reflective tone. Well, still, I'm sure, as this campaign goes on and whoever he's running against, you'll still see the fiery speeches. You hopefully will see another debate, especially if it's a different candidate. But I do think that there's a difference in a liberty that he has to speak in a different way that you wouldn't expect from President Trump just a week ago.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's a self-reflection. You saw the interaction from his grandkids at the convention, of course, his sons and his family coming together and being there. I think, again, a strong symbol. And, someone who is, again, went through an experience where they said, even though the crowd said no, of course, they believe, like most people believe, that he was saved, almost supernaturally. And as he acknowledged, that he really shouldn't be there based off the facts of where the shooter was, the kind of weapon they had, how close they were, how many shots they were able to get off. And of course, not forgetting that someone did lose their life. It wasn't like this shooter was missing people or missed Donald Trump. He shot him in the head. He just happened to turn his head in the right way at the right moment in the right second in history, or he wouldn't have been there this week, and we'd be a different country. I think the only reason that even like the MSNBC types could even be critical last night was because Donald Trump is back on stage as the nominee. And they were also covering for a mess which is happening inside their own party, which is whether or not Joe Biden is going to survive as the candidate for the Democrat Party. What happens to Harris? What is it, Michelle Obama? What happens to all of them and this money they've raised? It's a mess. And so I think, honestly, this convention, you will remember that moment, Will, because of what happened in Pennsylvania. But for the most part, you get through this week, it's not so defining to your campaign. J.D. Vance has a lot of work to do to still introduce himself to the country, and Donald Trump has a lot of work to do. But if you can get through this week without kind of a mess or without any missteps, that's smooth enough. And that happened. The convention was smooth. The speakers ran the gamut of diversity and difference, even of opinion, who come together under the Make America Great Again banner. So, folks, I encourage you, support the work of the ACLJ. We're getting to the bottom of these issues with the weaponization of our legal system, of course, and fighting back against that at the ACLJ. Double the impact of your donation at aclj.org.